So towards the end of class today, remember, you are not waiting for me to tell you to post your exit comments, especially if you know you are leaving class early for any reason. You want to make sure that within those last 10 minutes of class, you get your exit comment posted. As I was saying, the opening comments, I'm not going to push you too hard on that, but the exiting comments, come on. If we're in class for 90 minutes and all you can say habitually, now this is individual, habitually as an individual is like, see you next class. I am trying here, people, to make class worth coming to and doing stuff in. But I also use the comments to give highlights. So the exit comments are very useful. And if I have opening comments that are useful, I'll put those in the highlights. And then you'll notice that in the video section where I post the videos for alternative or just review, I don't have often highlights to post. That's because you have given me not much to work with in the exit comments. But the idea is you are posting something that demonstrates you are consciously, mentally ready to be present, and then at the end of class that you did something that was course related and hopefully useful. Yeah, so if you have a comment that you just want me to radically change everything, please don't put me on blast in the chat area. You can just talk to me during office hours for those kinds of things. But think about the exit and opening comments as a place to share your thoughts. And then I go and kind of like reap the pieces and give them back to you. Okay, so today, I'm gonna scroll back up. My apologies, I really thought this week 6 was showing yesterday, but it wasn't. Today, we're gonna talk about the Hickson. Last week I mentioned that it's a part of my teaching process to actually get us talking about at least one common practice activity. And this semester has been challenging for a number of reasons, so we're just now getting to that. I'm hoping to be able to continue that. So we're gonna talk about the Jennifer Hickson piece because she has at least 2 practices in 2 different chapters around the same text. So that's why I picked on her. And last week you were asked to, for homework, quote, is to look at the practice that you should have already done on Hickson from the images chapter. And then my hope was to urge you and push you through to make sure you did at least this one practice by today in chapter 6. So Hickson, we're gonna talk about the how this writer uses imagery, techniques, and strategies, and also tension. And I want you to think about how when you're writing, it's not just 1 or 2 or 3 techniques. We as writers, we have layered techniques. So you may want to start thinking about techniques as like major and minor. So there are a lot of techniques and strategies going on, but there are some that you rely on to engage depending on what your end goal as a writer. But there are always multiple strategies happening in a piece. And that's why when we start to interpret or try to pick apart a writing, as critical thinkers that way, as people who are analyzing other people's writing, we need to keep in mind that there are a lot of things happening in a piece. And a writer may or may not have thought about the specific set of strategies that we're talking about at the moment. I remember someone last week talking about a writer who say that famous writer probably would not say this thing about his or her work. And it's true. It doesn't make what we're saying now valid or invalid because these interpretations are just that. They're interpretations built on having some sort of evidence. And for us, our evidence is building strategies and techniques to improve our skills as creative writers. So that's going back to the craft of writing. We can make it better. So all this talking is sort of part of my mini lesson and lecture. I'm hoping to get through a little bit about image, energy, and tension. So right now, this is how I'm going to assume that you were prepared, is I'm going to go ahead and put you into these small groups, and you have about 15 minutes to discuss specifically these two chapters and what Hickson has done in her writing in for that particular piece. When we come back, we're going to do the usual, have someone report out for you. I'm going to try to come into the breakout rooms and see what you're talking about. But when we come back, everyone will raise their hands, and then we'll report out. And I'm trying to put you in groups that don't have more than 4 people. So random, you're gonna go now in to those rooms, and hopefully everyone is here, and I will set my time correctly, not for 62 minutes, for about 15, something like that. Okay, that's your charge. You should get an invite in a sec. You know I'm recording this part, Jamie. So you're on camera. All right, so thanks for doing that. I made it to groups 7, 6, 5, and 4. I didn't have time to bug 3, 2, and 1. I don't like saying hands up. That sounds really like I'm arresting everybody. But when you come back to this group, you should have raised your hand as in the classroom. And then we're gonna get a short report out. Remember, your report out's gonna be like 2 minutes or less. And everyone talked about the same thing, so we should be able to get through it. Whoever it is your spokesperson. Basically, what was your takeaway? And I might interject. And after your spokesperson says their piece takeaways, you can fill in the gaps or just lower your hands, and then we'll keep going. All right, so with that, let's go ahead, and you have the power to unmute yourself. I'm getting quite skilled at turning that superpower on and off. So we could, let's just go through, I can see my group. So let's just go with the group that had Jacob, Luke, and Thomas, because I didn't get to your group. So we're gonna start.
Oh, good. Okay, I can report out if that's all right. All right, so I'll just quick summarize the first, what we did for chapter 4, chapter 6, and then how we combine the two. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay, so for the first chapter 4 question, which basically talked about how her speaking changed how the story was told. We talked about how her body language, her tone of voice, and how the audience reacted changed how certain parts of the story felt and like looked like, you know, it made it so like some instances where you think would be very heavy, dreadful, were actually really lighthearted because she either had a chuckle or she got a chuckle out of the crowd, and those instances become more like brighter, sunnier. Or in some cases where things were far more dreadful, like if she had a tremor in her voice, or if she, or like she was talking about how she talks, whenever she talks about her boyfriend, she almost sounds like she's going to cry. And generally that basically gives her far more control over how the story is told. And in the chapter 6, we talked about how how tension can like come from the creation and resolution of conflict, and how this story literally starts first sentence with conflict, and how it's interspaced with smaller conflicts that small conflicts happen, small conflicts get resolved, so tension kind of builds and falls in that. And then we kind of combine the two by saying, since she has so much control over what conflict is, basically there's like lighthearted instances where there's like, you know, that's where tension breaks. And then there's really heavy sets when she's talking about her, like when she's talking about her boyfriend, with a, like when she's almost sounding like she's going to try. That creates a more sense of building tension, of how she doesn't seem like she's going to be able to solve it, basically. And
Wow, I'm
unresolved conflict is
gonna stop you. I
yeah,
wish
okay.
time to go into your group. I miss your group. Sounds like you had a very rich conversation. So
I don't know how much I wanted to like
what?
shorten it.
Oh, so as we are hearing the groups report out, there is no need, if you've heard something, we're adding to that. We're doing our best to try to build a little short, concise conversation here. So people from that group, if you're happy with that report out, you can put your hands down. And then the next group I have is had Macy, Gabriel, and then Evan.
I'll be the one who's reporting out for that. So for chapter number 4, we were saying that if you listen to her, the tone that she uses, like what Jacob was saying, gave us a better look at like you could hear the story from her perspective, and like the little gestures that she would do, like talking with her hands. For me, that just I don't know, that's just something that I noticed that I wouldn't really get with reading. And then for number 6, let me see what the practice was. But anyways, we were saying that
this is where you can help your team members out, folks. But go ahead.
Oh, I was saying I don't remember exactly what the practice was called, but we were talking about that the images and the descriptions in between the conversations created a sense of tension for us.
Okay, thank you. All right, group 3 had Jamie, Lydia, and Natalie.
So in our group for the chapter 4 practice, we went a little bit more basic. It was all about creating moving images. So in a basic sense, we were talking about how she uses a lot of descriptive words to create images, as well as when you're listening to it, it's different because you can like hear the emotion and how she wants the story to be presented, rather than when you're just reading it on a paper, you kind of have to make it up yourself as you go. And then for the chapter 6 one, we talked about how everything kind of had a balance to it. So when she got out of the car at the beginning, she had a cigarette, but she needed a light. And then all of a sudden there was a lady who had the light and needed a cigarette. And there was like a balance to everything, and how everything just kind of worked out in the end. And so that created the tension, and then it resolved itself, and there was more tension, and it kind of resolved itself. So that, as well as, yeah.
And that does speak to, I know that the practice from chapter 6 is the very first one. So it's asking you at the beginning, like, what do you think is going on, and how Hickson is creating this sort of dramatic story, or retelling. And when you look through the chapter, it'll tell you things like, how she uses setting, and how a writer works with characters. And if you think about the number of characters in this piece, there aren't a lot of people. It's a short piece. There are not a lot of characters. So each of those characters, they have to have a role, a reason. They have to bring something to this whole, the formula that the chapter 6 gives us is this desire, and danger equals tension. And you have, one main character, everyone else has supporting roles. And what do they bring to the overall, the character's desire, which is the Hickson character in this piece, what's happening. So even the number of characters, everyone has to have a reason to be there. And are they adding are they causing problems, resolving them, or maybe a little bit of them all? I like the detail that you gave was about, you know, the need for something, even if that something is a light and then look like magic, but not so magic. There is that the light for the cigarette, which is and just the whole role of, I'll hold that, see if anybody picked this up. All right, so let's go 4. Adam, Hannah, and Jesusa.
Yeah, so we used a lot of the same, or we talked about a lot of the same stuff previous people did as well about imagery, how her thoughts are causing tension as well. And we spoke about with you a little bit about how the lack of tension is often sometimes more important than the tension itself, because you have to have some place for it to build from. Otherwise, the story is just boring. Like, oh, you can always assume that they're going to be able to do whatever. So we also spoke about humor and her lack of humor and how that relieved the tense situations quite often. And I think my favorite one through the whole piece was right as soon as they lit the first cigarette, 30 seconds. You know, I didn't think that was going to happen to me. Oh man, that was close. Heck yeah. So as a reader, you keep asking how are they going to get out of the situation? And generally, like, I mean, as long as it's not like Deus Machina, like the Eagles coming to save the day, it should feel good when they finish that. Another thing that I picked up after you mentioned something to our group was in the very beginning of the piece, she makes it seem like her boyfriend's just absolutely god awful, and then she sees later on, like, I thought I had it bad. These people are much worse. So like I think that builds like an extra layer of tension, not for her but more for us, because we think like this man's horrible, and then in the very very end is like I quit my boyfriend, but then I quit cigarettes later, and she calls him in that my nice boyfriend, and so it's just kind of like, oh well, maybe I don't have it quite so bad, and then it just lets me personally think about my life as well. I don't know, it's just deep reflection. So
that does speak to the idea of layers. So one of the other reasons I wanted you to look at one piece in 2 different chapters is so that you could start thinking about how all these strategies and tools come together and are layered on top of each other.
What was the chapter we were talking about with like the feminine and masculine words? Because we spoke about that, about how she used very short masculine words, and that really drives how quick you can build tension, because it's quick, fast.
Yeah, we were talking about that. That came in to the that song remix, the Grenade. We were looking at strategies.
That's right. So yeah, we did talk about that. So that was cool.
So that's a good point to even think about it. And I mentioned this in a couple other of the groups. The strategies that we're looking at, we just happen to be looking at it in, say, the container of a nonfiction or a creative nonfiction piece. We can see that same strategy used in other containers, a haiku, flash fiction. So it's the strategy. And so how does it work? So if short, long vowels or consonant sounds, if they do one thing, and we happen to be looking at masculine, feminine rhyme schemes, that's what it was. In the song activity, well, what do masculine and feminine rhyme schemes do in this work you happen to be looking at? And I think you are onto something, that in the quickness of pace, in pacing things, in moving things along, yes, that is how the vocabulary you choose is going to have some sort of accumulative effect. So I think that's an interesting point, that, you know, she tends to use shorter words, and that could be, if you go back and look at rhyme or even just syllables and type of words, it may lead you to say, oh, this is why you feel the anticipation growing. That's a good point. All right, group 5. Bailey, Bradley, Zane.
I honestly, I don't think we have much to add. So we talked about show versus tell, and we talked about creating anxiety and all the unsettling moments that the thing has to offer. They all reach resolution at some point, but you do get dragged along, sometimes longer than others. Like she finds the lighter pretty quickly, but takes her a couple years to quit. Takes her a long time to get home. I think that's the biggest one.
And in that, you just talked about 3 different like timelines in one little short piece. And how each of these, and each of these time pieces, time lines in this story help you understand something about the incident or the life experience or the whole point of that story in general. This is also a point where I want to say, if you haven't looked at the braiding technique in chapter 10, you should take a look at it. For me, it looks like it takes way more patience than I have, but it looks awesome. And it's great to be able to see how various storylines or plots or stories are woven in together. And this is a very simple version of it, just those 3 little time things that you like, the lighter, the quitting, the boyfriend, the get to home, just those timelines. That's not at all very complicated, but looking at the braiding technique formula or a form of writing is worthwhile to have in your tool set as a writer and a reader, so you can pick this stuff out and see how it works. 6, Alicia, Alyssa, and Cole. And I'm sorry if it's Alicia. That's what happens when you fail Spanish class like 5 times. I didn't see.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Go ahead.
My group, we talked about basically the same thing everyone talked about for chapter 4. And then for chapter 6, we talked about how like the formula for attention, the desire plus danger, is just used like after each other. Like for the first one, kind of similar to what Adam said, like her desire, like she loves her boyfriend, but the danger is like we think that he's this horrible person. And then she desires to smoke, but she doesn't have a lighter. And then she finds someone who could be dangerous. So it just kind of like keeps going in like a cycle, one thing after another.
And the idea of a cycle too goes back to the idea of these strategies are building, like again, going way back to the beginning of the semester when Zinsser's on writing well. It is about how you use these techniques like an architect or a builder, because I'm a builder, not an architect. But those layering of these things and this cycle. So whatever it helps you as a writer start to see patterns and seeing how these techniques are working. And again, I'll say this, that there are dominant strategies, but underneath those dominant strategies are all these other areas. There's another section on page 237 in chapter 6. It's called layering and adding dimension. And I want to point that out because this piece is so short and you have the piece that you can listen to it and you can read it out of the textbook. I think it is a really good piece to practice some of these strategies on. So I'll just mention that again is page 237, the layers adding dimension, because that's another thing that's happening in this text, that she has all these small pieces. If we want to talk about things like symbolism and metaphor and one thing representing another, yes, it's in here. And this is a really good practice piece to see what you can uncover and then start working to identify them in your writing. But it's also great to, I think the better thing is to identify it in other people's writing. It's sometimes kind of hard to see what you do at home in your own writing. All right, last group, Allison, Isabella, and Jamie.
Yeah, so I think pretty much what we talked about has been covered. But I did want to add, I think a lot of the tension was held in, like other groups had said, like what she chose to uh, put so much detail in and then otherwise leave it out. Because like the two like big stories, like her boyfriend that may or may not have been a good guy, and the fact that she quit smoking, she was like, oh yeah, I quit smoking. Like she briefly mentioned it, but she focused so much on this one little time, this one little story. And so I think that's why I enjoyed listening to it more instead of reading it, because she could put so much, emotion and drive into just the one single part. And I think that really makes or breaks the tension, because you want to focus on like, oh, is this like a bad boyfriend? Like, is he abusive or something? But then she just kind of jumps right into this one time where she found somebody with a lighter when she needed a lighter the most.
All right. Well, thank you. I am, for me, can say I think that's probably the best discussion that we've had, and we're going to try to keep it up to that par and just get better if possible. Even though that did take up my time to talk about my mini lesson can wait. And what I want to do, and hopefully you can see my screen, I'm showing you, this is in the discussion board area, the craft of writing prompts. So these are some of the prompts from that I want you to consider with chapter 6. And one of the things in chapter 6 that Stella tells us is that, like I said, she gives this easy formula, but it's got a lot of pieces. Desire plus danger equals tension. And then the example, and this is all from the first few pages of the text, is that when a writer combines desire and danger, that those two things coming together automatically creates the tension. But you still need to do something with that tension. You need to be aware that you just can't leave people in this hyper state for too long. But the other thing, the example we get is that the desire and the tension, the desire and the danger, the examples for the text are all very concrete, very specific themes. So example is the character, she says, is they want something. They want connection, money, score some points. The danger is something that's tangible. And I want to just put something out there, is that, does this formula work if the danger and or the desire isn't concrete? Like, does this formula only work with concrete representations of those things? Can it work without concrete representations? Why or why not? What might it look like if, and this is an additional question, because we know it does work as presented, but what happens if one of those parts are not? So this, again, this area, just remind you, is where you can come and engage and answer some of these questions. But since I do not have time for my mini lesson, I'm going to move it till Thursday, because I'd rather you take this, hopefully, momentum and spend some time writing. We're not going to come back in small groups and discuss writing today. I'm just going to give you the half hour. So we're going to come back and we're going to report out. So when we come back at 2:15, it's 1:40. And when we come back at 2, they'll give you about 25 minutes at 2:15. So this is, again, is your writing time. And when we come back, I hope you'll use the exit comment in the recap portion of class, especially the exit comment, to report out what you have worked on. I'm not going to put you in small groups. I'm just going to mute everyone and expect you to be back here at 2:15. So that gives you 25 minutes of writing time out of today's class. And I'll be around. Oh, I see a question. If you still have your question, Isabella? Oh. So if you are still on, I'm going to stop my recording. Okay, we should be coming back together. I'm gonna spend this time doing a recap. So because we did not, well, let me do this second. Because we did not do the small group report out, so please use your exit comment as a way to share what you did spend your time working on. As I try to break up the screen again and do a little bit of recap, make sure my Blackboard is showing things how I want it to show. So I'm going to try to have like this continuous conversation and put my recaps so that they address the strategies and things that we're looking at out of the book. So the imagery chapter and energy chapter, both those chapters 4 and 5, you're going to find chapter 6, the tension chapter, is going to refer to these other strategies. And that reference to the other strategies isn't something that's unique or I want you to think is unique to the textbook, but it's sort of getting you to think about this in your own writing as a creative writer, that you are always looking in your toolbox for the various your various strategies and tools you have as a writer. I've gotten a sense, not from everyone, but from a few people, that some of the writers in this class have their niches. Like, this is it. This is what I do. This is what I like. So I need you to keep in mind that as an introductory course, this is not going at all to tailor to what you want to do specifically. So this is an introductory level course. What is it? It's an introductory level course. And so it's going to look at a variety of introductory building skill set. So in that respect, I want you to if you take a look at chapter 3, which was the building blocks chapter, everything after 3 are actually those tools that you can put in your tool case. By a show of hands, can you let me know if you see my Blackboard page shared on the screen? Someone, okay, cool. I don't want to start talking and nothing's there again. So with 4, 5, and 6, you are now attempting to build your own set of tools, so your own set of building blocks. So to that extent, there's a strategy that I wanted to mention, and a few people talked about Hickson's use of body language, or talking about, people, or giving you images of people's moving or gesturing, how we move through space. There is a specific writing technique, and it's called specific narrative action. Specific narrative action, it means when you write or describe people moving or gesturing, you're using specific narrative actions. And so that came to mind. Also, perspective. So when she talks about perspective, I'm scrolling down the screen as I talk here because I want to just focus on this image and tension here. Perspective, I think it was last week, just briefly mentioned, what was it? Like first, second, third person, like point of view. So thinking how just the selection of voice, first, second, or third, how that actually also will serve as a specific writing tool for you as a writer. And another thing that someone came out of the groups was how she uses images and how she uses description to change the mood, so set the tone, and also humor So how she manipulates, how she describes the mood and atmosphere and tone of the piece through how she presents a variety of images and how she paints those pictures, or for lack of, not overly describing things for us. So those are my just like lecture thoughts as we end the class today. And I don't have a pre-lecture on these things because it grows out of your conversation. So that's why I try to get into the different groups. All right, so my official recap, we had writing time today. You should be posting in the chat area. Again, appreciate if you post how you spent your time. So on Thursday, I had to move the mini lesson. So you should have already signed up for a writing project. So this is where we're going to start class on Thursday. I'm going to have those groups preset. I will be presetting those groups before class starts, and you should have already done this. If not, you need to make sure you get this done today, because during office hours, I will, towards the end of my office hours, I'm going to start putting these groups together. I will check them again before class. I've moved my mini lessons on images and energy to Thursday, and then we'll have writing time. We're not going to do report out at all this week in your small group writing time. I just don't have time to do that. I think, unless I would like for you to have the small group share, but unless I can recap some time, we probably won't. And then by Sunday, I don't have my deadline up there, but you should submit chapter 6 writing log by Sunday. And I have given you the power to unmute yourself in these last 8 minutes of class.
Hey, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mrs. Muhammad. Quick question. What page are the writing projects on? Because I just realized I did not, my bad, completely my fault.
You are asking me a challenging question.
Always do.
The writing projects are at the end. They come near the end of each chapter. So each chapter has its own set. Yeah.
Okay.
I think they come before the readings in that chapter. Yes, they come
really before.
That's content.
Counterintuitive.
Yeah, they come after the content of the chapter, but before the readings that are associated with it.
Page 246.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were talking about for this chapter.
Yeah, chapter 5, the one we're supposed to.
Yeah, I totally missed that detail. So, see, that's how you help each other, just by chiming in. Thank you, whoever helped.
You said 246?
Yeah, that's correct.
Isn't that chapter 6, though? Wait a minute.
Well,
it isn't chapter 6 what we're doing?
No,
chapter
yeah, he's asking for chapter 5. Like I said, I missed that detail. But if you have the text, it's at the end of each of the chapters.
Yeah,
chapter
I have the text
5 is
right
209.
Thank you.
There you go. Thanks.
I have it right here. I just asked because it saves a lot of flipping. Ah!
No, it saves you flipping. I was literally just flipping to find it. So, are there any other, the other thing, if you haven't started, so you should have submitted your first forms practice. We have about 6 minutes of class time. Any comments about how that went for you all? That just any, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just not share my screen. So any comments about your first practice?
I made a villanelle, and I honestly thought it was a pain in the ass.
Good.
Yeah, it was challenging to fit everything into the constraints that you set yourself up with the first 2 lines. So I mean, I made it work, but it's definitely not something I'm very proud of.
That sounds wonderful. I think that is what we should be doing at this stage in class. So, and that's why I think someone else asked, is this going to be the project you turn in at the end of the semester? It should not be. This should be your opportunity to try your hand at something. And so now we're off to, we're leaving poetry, those forms of poetry, and you should start this week. get started on the second chapter 10 form practice, which is you only have 2 choices. I'm excited about this one because it'll be easier for me to assess because there are only 2 choices. So you should start with that. I'm going to make sure. And I think I have here on Blackboard just a reminder there to look at my dyslexia. Isn't it pretty? That's how I spell no all the time. But what to know, that was going to be due October 18th. And get started working. You have graphic or flash fiction. And I think in the text, flash and micro, the same thing. So other than that, that's all I have. I will be here for the next 4 minutes. Make sure you do your exit comment. And I think we got a decent video this time around. I'm going to start recording.